Charlie Chaplin, born on April 16, 1889, in the impoverished district of Walworth, London, emerged from a background shaped by hardship and instability. His early life was marred by the deep economic struggles of his family, which played a critical role in shaping both his character and his future career in the entertainment industry. His parents, Charles Chaplin Sr. and Hannah Chaplin, were both involved in music hall performances, but their careers were plagued by financial instability, alcoholism, and mental illness, making it difficult for the family to stay afloat. Chaplin's father, a singer, and his mother, a singer and actress, were both part of the working-class entertainment scene, performing in small venues around London. However, their relationship was fragile, and Chaplin's father was largely absent from his life. By the time Charlie was born, the Chaplin family was already facing deep financial difficulty. His father's alcoholism and abusive tendencies contributed to a tumultuous home life, and his mother's own health problems, including a deteriorating mental state, led to her being frequently hospitalized. As a result, Charlie and his half-brother Sidney spent much of their childhood in poverty. At the age of 7, Chaplin's life took a significant turn when his mother was admitted to a mental institution, leaving Charlie and his brother to fend for themselves. Their lives were further disrupted when they were sent to separate orphanages and workhouses. The conditions of these institutions were harsh and often abusive. For Charlie, this period in the workhouse left a profound impression, as he was exposed to the difficult realities of the lower class in Victorian England. His time there influenced much of his later work, especially his ability to convey the struggles of the underprivileged with both humor and pathos in his films. Despite the challenging environment, young Chaplin's early experiences also exposed him to the world of performance. He had his first brush with the entertainment industry when, at the age of 8, he joined a group of child performers known as the 8 Lancashire Lads. This was a pivotal moment in Chaplin's life, as he began to explore the world of comedy and stage performance. Although he faced many hardships, these early performances helped shape his future as a performer, providing him with a sense of purpose and an escape from the dire circumstances surrounding his family. During this period, Chaplin's mother, despite her mental illness, remained a significant influence on his life. She was a performer herself and instilled in him an appreciation for the arts. It was from her that Chaplin inherited his love of comedy and the ability to make others laugh, even in the most difficult circumstances. She would often entertain him with songs and stories, fueling his imagination and providing him with the early tools to navigate his tumultuous surroundings. Even though she struggled with her own mental health, her devotion to her children helped shape Chaplin's work ethic and his understanding of the importance of resilience. At the age of 9, Chaplin joined the ranks of music hall performers, an environment where his early exposure to comedy would begin to take root. He was cast in a minor role in a production at the famous Palladium Theatre in London. As he began performing, he quickly gained recognition for his natural talent for physical comedy. His experiences in the harsh workhouse environment, combined with his love of performance, led him to adopt a style of humor that was at once slapstick and deeply human. This blend of humor, driven by both a personal understanding of hardship and a profound commitment to entertainment, would later become one of his trademarks. Chaplin's formative years in London helped him develop a keen sense of observation and a remarkable ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He learned early on that humor could serve as both a means of survival and a powerful way to communicate complex emotions. It was during this time that he began to realize that, despite the challenges he faced, his comedic abilities were a means of transcending the hardships of his childhood. These early experiences in London would later inform his development of the iconic tramp character, whose plight resonated with audiences around the world. In 1903, at the age of 14, Chaplin's fortunes changed dramatically when he joined the Fred Karno Repertoire Company, a well-known British comedy troupe. This was a turning point in his life, as it marked the beginning of his professional career in the world of entertainment. Under Karno's tutelage, Chaplin honed his comedic talents, especially in the realm of physical comedy. His time with the Karno troupe allowed him to refine his timing, develop his improvisational skills, and learn the intricacies of performing before an audience. It was here that Chaplin first began to develop the distinctive comedic persona that would later be seen in his films. While working with the Karno Company, Chaplin's name began to spread within the entertainment world. By 1912, he had already gained some recognition in England, but it was his 1913 trip to the United States that marked the true beginning of his global fame. Chaplin was hired by Mack Sennett's Keystone Studios, marking the beginning of his film career. The move to Hollywood would dramatically alter Chaplin's trajectory, offering him opportunities that were unimaginable in his earlier years of poverty. Nonetheless, even as Chaplin embarked on his cinematic journey, his early experiences in the workhouses and orphanages of London remained a profound influence on his work. As Charlie Chaplin's early years in London unfolded, his desire to escape the harsh realities of his childhood only grew stronger. His foray into the world of entertainment would soon become his lifeline, providing both an emotional outlet and a pathway to stability. The experiences in workhouses and orphanages, though grueling, provided Chaplin with a unique perspective on life, one that would later become instrumental in his rise to stardom. But it was not until he was introduced to the vibrant world of vaudeville that his true potential as a performer began to take shape. Vaudeville, with its variety of acts and emphasis on live performance, became a natural environment for a young Chaplin to hone his skills. At the age of 9, he joined the 8 Lancashire Lads, a troupe of young performers, marking his official entry into the entertainment world. The group was primarily known for its singing, dancing, and slapstick comedy, an area where Chaplin quickly distinguished himself. His natural comedic ability, which had been nurtured by the hardships of his early life, was immediately apparent. Chaplin's energetic physical comedy and his ability to win over audiences with his infectious charm allowed him to become a standout performer in the troupe. Despite his undeniable talent, Chaplin's journey to vaudeville success was not without its struggles. Life as a young performer was not glamorous. The troupe toured tirelessly across Britain, performing in a variety of provincial theaters and working-class venues. Conditions were often cramped and uncomfortable, and Chaplin's early experiences in the business were marked by long hours, low pay, and difficult working relationships. Yet, this rigorous training ground proved essential in shaping Chaplin's future career. The constant need to perform in front of diverse audiences taught him how to adapt his act to different crowds, a skill that would later prove invaluable in his transition to film. The vaudeville circuit was where Chaplin truly began to understand the value of timing in comedy. Much of his humor was rooted in slapstick and physical exaggeration, two staples of vaudeville performance. The quick exchanges, pratfalls, and sight gags that became central to his comedic style were perfected in this environment. His ability to command the stage and keep the audience engaged through sheer physicality made him a rising star within the vaudeville circuit. He was soon known for his impeccable sense of timing, a skill that would serve him well as he moved into film. At the age of 16, Chaplin's performances in vaudeville earned him a spot with Fred Karno's renowned comedy troupe. Karno, a leading figure in British comedy, was known for his pioneering work in the development of physical comedy, and his troupe became one of the most celebrated in the country. It was under Karno's guidance that Chaplin began to refine his craft, learning not only the mechanics of comedy, but also the subtleties of stage presence and audience interaction. Carno's troupe was famous for its high-energy, slapstick routines, and Chaplin became one of its brightest stars, earning admiration for his ability to combine wit with physical humor. Carno's troupe was also where Chaplin began to experiment with creating distinct comedic personas. It was during his time with Carno that Chaplin first began to develop what would later become his most famous character, the Tramp. The Tramp was a character that embodied the essence of Chaplin's childhood struggles, an impoverished, ragged figure who remained cheerful in the face of adversity. This persona, with its baggy pants, oversized bowler hat, and ill-fitting suit, was a blend of vulnerability and resilience, mirroring Chaplin's own early life. The Tramp would go on to become the symbol of Chaplin's career, endearing him to audiences around the world. Chaplin's time with Carno was not only pivotal for his development as a comedian, but also for his understanding of the global potential of his talents. As Carno's troupe toured across the United Kingdom and Europe, Chaplin gained exposure to a wide variety of audiences and performers. This period abroad introduced Chaplin to the international appeal of comedy, particularly its universal nature. Whether performing in London, Paris, or Berlin, Chaplin was able to connect with audiences regardless of their language or background. This realization would later influence his approach to film, which, like vaudeville, required the ability to reach a broad audience through visual and physical comedy. In 1912, after years of hard work with Carno's troupe, Chaplin received an offer that would change the course of his life. He was invited to perform in the United States. The opportunity came when he was hired by Max Sennett's Keystone Studios, one of the leading film production companies of the time. At the time, silent films were gaining immense popularity, and Sennett Studio was known for its slapstick comedies, which aligned perfectly with Chaplin's style. Although he was initially hesitant to transition to film, Chaplin's growing desire for fame and financial stability made the opportunity too enticing to pass up. This decision marked the beginning of his monumental career in Hollywood. Upon arriving in Hollywood in 1913, Chaplin faced a new set of challenges. The world of film was vastly different from that of vaudeville. It was clear that Chaplin would need to adjust his performances to fit the medium. However, the transition was not as difficult as he had initially feared. Having spent years honing his physical comedy on the vaudeville stage, Chaplin found that his natural ability to communicate through body language was well suited to the silent film format. In fact, his experience in live performance allowed him to approach filmmaking with a unique perspective, understanding the importance of visual storytelling and the emotional power of facial expressions and gestures. Chaplin's time in vaudeville had also provided him with the discipline necessary for the film industry. The demanding schedule and constant need to innovate in live performance gave him the work ethic and creativity that would serve him throughout his career. As Chaplin began his film career, he applied the lessons he had learned on the vaudeville stage: timing, audience awareness, and the art of creating memorable characters. These skills would become the foundation of his success in Hollywood, where he would go on to create some of the most iconic films in cinema history. In 1913, at the age of 24, Charlie Chaplin arrived in Hollywood with a reputation already beginning to take shape within the entertainment world. He was a seasoned performer, having spent his formative years touring with Fred Carno's famous comedy troupe, and he was no stranger to the demands of live performance. However, the transition from vaudeville to film was a significant turning point in Chaplin's career, for it was in Hollywood that he would not only find his true cinematic voice, but also introduce a new era in comedy that would shape the future of film. Chaplin's arrival at Keystone Studios marked the beginning of his foray into silent films, a medium that was quickly rising in popularity. At the time, the film industry was still in its infancy, with many filmmakers still experimenting with the possibilities of the medium. silent films, which relied on physicality and expressive performances rather than dialogue, offered Chaplin a platform to showcase the unique skills he had honed on stage. His ability to communicate through exaggerated gestures, facial expressions, and slapstick humor made him an ideal fit for the genre, and it quickly became apparent that his style would have a lasting impact on Hollywood. Chaplin's first appearance on screen was in Making a Living, 1914, a short film where he played a swindler. Though the film itself was relatively forgettable, it marked the beginning of his long and illustrious career in the film industry. It wasn't until his second film, The Kid Auto Races at Venice, 1914, that Chaplin's iconic tramp character was born. In this short, Chaplin portrayed a scruffy, ill-fitting figure who found himself in comedic situations, a role that would define his career. The film was a hit, and audiences quickly embraced Chaplin's unique persona. The tramp, with his baggy clothes, oversized bowler hat, and signature mustache, became a symbol of the downtrodden yet ever-hopeful everyman. The success of The Kid Auto Races at Venice propelled Chaplin to new heights. Within months, he had become one of the most popular actors in Hollywood. His physical comedy, combined with a deep empathy for his characters, struck a chord with audiences worldwide. Unlike many silent film stars who relied on slapstick gags for humor, Chaplin infused his performances with a vulnerability and charm that made his character not only funny but deeply human. Audiences found themselves rooting for the tramp, whose misadventures in the face of adversity mirrored the struggles of ordinary people. As Chaplin's popularity soared, he began to gain more control over his career, a rare feat in the early days of Hollywood. In 1914, he signed a contract with a mutual film corporation that allowed him to produce his own films. This contract marked a critical juncture in Chaplin's career, as it gave him the creative freedom to experiment with new ideas and take risks with his work. It was during this period that he began to fully embrace the potential of the medium, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in silent cinema. Chaplin's early films were often short comedies, but as he honed his craft, he began to create works that were more complex in both theme and structure. His 1915 film The Tramp, which showcased his famous character in a series of humorous situations, was an immediate success. But it was his next film, The Gold Rush, 1925, that truly solidified his status as a cinematic genius. The Gold Rush was not only a technical triumph, but also a masterpiece of storytelling, combining humor with poignant social commentary. The film's depiction of the tramp's adventures in the frozen wilderness, his struggle for survival, and his search for love resonated deeply with audiences. In The Gold Rush, Chaplin also demonstrated his growing mastery of the visual language of film. The iconic scene where the tramp eats his boot, a gag that has become emblematic of silent film humor, was a prime example of Chaplin's ability to convey meaning without dialogue. The film's success was a testament to Chaplin's skill as a storyteller, for it proved that silent films could be both funny and emotionally compelling. The movie also showcased his pioneering use of physical comedy, demonstrating his deep understanding of timing, space, and rhythm, elements that would become central to his work. As the 1920s progressed, Chaplin's career continued to ascend. He became not only one of the highest-paid actors of his time, but also one of the most influential figures in Hollywood. By this point, Chaplin had already revolutionized the role of the comedian in cinema. While other filmmakers and actors were still experimenting with the possibilities of the silent film format, Chaplin had fully embraced its potential, creating films that combined humor with social commentary. His characters, particularly the tramp, became symbolic of the working-class struggle, a theme that resonated with audiences during the economic hardships of the early 20th century. Despite his success in the silent film era, Chaplin's artistic vision was beginning to evolve. As the film industry began to shift toward the introduction of sound films in the late 1920s, Chaplin found himself at a crossroads. Silent films had been the foundation of his success, but with the advent of sound, the future of cinema seemed uncertain. While many of Chaplin's contemporaries eagerly embraced the new technology, Chaplin remained resistant, believing that the visual storytelling of silent films was superior. His commitment to maintaining the purity of silent cinema would be put to the test in the coming years, as the film industry rapidly transitioned to the sound era. During this time, Chaplin's creative output remained as prolific as ever. In 1927, he released The Circus, a film that once again showcased his unique ability to combine slapstick humor with moments of genuine pathos. In this film, Chaplin's tramp finds himself working as a clown in a circus, furthering his exploration of themes of loneliness, love, and the search for meaning. The film was both a critical and commercial success, reinforcing Chaplin's status as one of the most important filmmakers of the silent era. The late 1920s ushered in a transformative moment for the film industry, the advent of sound in cinema. The introduction of synchronized sound, particularly with the release of The Jazz Singer, 1927, revolutionized the way films were made, offering filmmakers a new tool to enhance storytelling and performance. For many, the shift to sound was welcomed as an exciting new frontier, a way to add a layer of realism and expression that silent films could never achieve. Yet, for Charlie Chaplin, whose career had been built on the power of visual storytelling, the transition to sound was not only an artistic challenge, but a deeply personal one. Chaplin was a staunch advocate for the silent film. To him, the silent format allowed for universal communication. It transcended language barriers, allowing audiences from all walks of life to connect with the characters on screen. His tramp character, with his exaggerated physicality, silent struggles, and moments of pathos, had become emblematic of a form of cinema that required no words to convey emotion. Sound, in Chaplin's eyes, threatened the purity of this art form. For this reason, he was initially reluctant to embrace the new technology, fearing that the addition of spoken dialogue might undermine the timeless quality of silent films. While many filmmakers eagerly jumped into the world of sound films, Chaplin remained resolute in his decision to continue making silent films. He refused to adapt to the new style, a choice that reflected not only his artistic vision, but also his deep-rooted belief that the silent film had the power to connect with audiences in a unique and unparalleled way. Chaplin's hesitation was also fueled by his belief that sound would interfere with the pacing and timing of physical comedy, which was essential to his filmmaking style. The subtlety of expression through body language and facial expressions, Chaplin believed, was something that could not be replicated by the spoken word. However, as the 1930s approached, it became increasingly clear that the film industry was evolving, and sound was becoming an inescapable part of the future. Many of Chaplin's peers, including stars like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, were forced to adapt to the new era, and some struggled with the change. The introduction of sound had already created new challenges for many filmmakers who had to adjust their methods of production to accommodate the technology. Chaplin, ever the perfectionist, began to question whether he could continue making films in an environment that was rapidly changing. It was at this juncture that Chaplin decided to create one of his most groundbreaking films, City Lights, 1931. City Lights would become a testament to Chaplin's artistic integrity and his ability to push the boundaries of silent cinema in an era increasingly dominated by sound. Though sound had become the industry standard, Chaplin chose to produce a silent film that would blend the innovations of the modern age with the tried-and-true techniques of the past. In City Lights, Chaplin incorporated elements of sound in a way that had never been seen before in a silent film. Though the film itself was entirely devoid of dialogue, Chaplin utilized a synchronized musical score and carefully placed sound effects, creating a richer auditory experience for the audience while still preserving the visual storytelling that had made him famous. The plot of City Lights was simple yet poignant, revolving around the tramp's interactions with a blind flower girl and a wealthy, eccentric man. The film's central theme of love and self-sacrifice was conveyed through Chaplin's ability to use his signature silent comedy techniques, combined with a deep emotional core that was unprecedented for a comedy of that time. The film's conclusion, an unforgettable moment in cinematic history, featured a scene where the blind girl regains her sight and recognizes the tramp's true identity. This emotional finale, which hinges entirely on Chaplin's subtle performance and visual cues, is often cited as one of the most touching moments in the history of film. When City Lights premiered, it was met with universal acclaim, proving that the silent film was still a viable and powerful medium, even in the sound era. Audiences were deeply moved by the film, and it became one of Chaplin's most beloved works. The film's success affirmed Chaplin's belief that silent films could still resonate with modern audiences, and it cemented his position as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. City Lights was a triumph for Chaplin, but it also marked a turning point in his career. He had shown that he could navigate the changing tides of the film industry without compromising his artistic vision. However, the success of City Lights also made it clear that Chaplin's career was at a crossroads, as the film industry continued to embrace the sound revolution with increasing fervor. After the success of City Lights, Chaplin faced mounting pressure to transition into sound films. By 1936, when he released Modern Times, it was clear that the future of cinema was inextricably tied to sound. Modern Times was Chaplin's first film to feature synchronized sound. But even in this film, Chaplin's commitment to silent comedy remained evident. The tramp character, now working in a factory, finds himself caught in the gears of industrial progress, struggling to keep up with the demands of the modern world. The film's use of sound was minimal, with only a few spoken words and sound effects scattered throughout. Chaplin's genius lay in his ability to blend the old and new, creating a film that was both a reflection of the changing times and a continuation of his silent film legacy. The use of sound in Modern Times was a significant milestone in Chaplin's career. While the film's dialogue was sparse, Chaplin used sound to heighten the comedy and intensify the commentary on the dehumanizing effects of industrialization. The film's famous opening scene, in which the tramp is swallowed by the gears of a factory, is a perfect example of how Chaplin used sound to enhance the visual experience. The clanging of the factory machines, paired with Chaplin's exaggerated physical movements, heightened the absurdity of the situation, blending slapstick comedy with a biting critique of the mechanized world. Despite embracing sound in Modern Times, Chaplin continued to maintain a careful balance between visual humor and auditory elements. He understood that sound could be a tool to enhance his storytelling, but he was also acutely aware of the importance of silence in his films. For Chaplin, silence was not just a lack of sound. It was a language in itself, one that could convey emotions in ways that dialogue could not. This was especially evident in his later films, where Chaplin continued to explore the relationship between sound and silence, using each to its fullest potential. Chaplin's ability to adapt to the new world of sound without abandoning his roots in silent cinema was a testament to his ingenuity as a filmmaker. The transition to sound posed numerous challenges, but Chaplin's artistic vision remained strong, and he was able to carve a path forward that allowed him to remain relevant in the ever-changing film industry. Through his films, Chaplin demonstrated that the power of visual storytelling and the essence of silent comedy could coexist with the innovations of the sound era, paving the way for future filmmakers to explore the possibilities of the medium. By the mid-1930s, Charlie Chaplin had become one of the most recognizable figures in the world. His tramp character, with its humble mannerisms and deep emotional depth, had transcended cinema to become a symbol of resilience, humor, and humanity. Audiences flocked to theaters to witness his latest creations, and his films were not only financially successful, but had a profound impact on the cultural landscape. Chaplin's global fame was unparalleled, and he had cemented his place as the most beloved comedian in the history of cinema. However, as the world entered a tumultuous period in history, Chaplin's personal life and political beliefs began to draw increasing attention and scrutiny, leading to a series of controversies that would overshadow some of his later years. In the 1930s, Chaplin's life was marked by a combination of artistic triumphs and personal challenges. His films continued to captivate audiences, and his reputation as a genius filmmaker remained unchallenged. However, the political climate of the time, particularly the rise of fascism and the looming threat of World War II, began to influence his work. As a staunch pacifist and vocal critic of authoritarian regimes, Chaplin's personal beliefs became increasingly apparent in his films. His 1940 masterpiece, The Great Dictator, was a direct response to the growing threat of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. The Great Dictator was Chaplin's first true foray into sound cinema, and it marked a dramatic departure from the slapstick comedy of his earlier films. In this political satire, Chaplin played both a Jewish barber and a dictator named Adenoid Hinkle, a thinly veiled caricature of Hitler. The film was a scathing critique of fascism, anti-Semitism, and the rise of totalitarianism in Europe. While Chaplin's trademark humor was still present, the film was laced with powerful social and political commentary. In the climactic speech of the film, Chaplin, as the barber, delivers an impassioned plea for peace, democracy, and human kindness. This speech, which has become one of the most iconic moments in film history, was a direct challenge to the growing global crisis and a call for unity in the face of tyranny. Despite the film's success and its critical acclaim, The Great Dictator was not without its controversy. Chaplin's decision to make a film that openly criticized Hitler and fascism put him at odds with various political groups, particularly in the United States, where isolationism was prevalent at the time. Many Americans were initially hesitant to engage with the film's pointed political message, and Chaplin was accused by some of using his celebrity to push his personal political agenda. At the same time, his outspoken pacifism and anti-authoritarian stance alienated him from others who believed that the United States should take a more aggressive stance against the Axis powers. Chaplin's political beliefs, which had been simmering under the surface for years, were now impossible to ignore, and his growing prominence as a political figure would eventually become a source of tension. As Chaplin's political activism intensified, so did the scrutiny of his personal life. In the early 1940s, Chaplin was embroiled in a series of high-profile scandals that would cast a shadow over his public image. His relationships with younger women became the subject of widespread media attention, particularly his marriage to 16-year-old Lita Gray in 1924. The public's fascination with Chaplin's personal life, particularly his relationships, was fueled by the moral climate of the time, which was highly critical of his behavior. This growing interest in Chaplin's private affairs coincided with his increasing political activism, leading to a perception that Chaplin was a figure to be both admired and condemned. In 1947, Chaplin's ties to leftist politics would lead to even greater controversy. As the McCarthy era took hold in the United States, Chaplin found himself increasingly at odds with the government. His associations with communist sympathizers, combined with his vocal criticism of the U.S. government's foreign policy, led to him being labeled a communist sympathizer by the House Un-American Activities Committee, WAC. Although Chaplin was never formally charged with any crime, the public backlash was intense. In 1952, while traveling abroad to promote a film in England, Chaplin was informed that his re-entry visa to the United States had been revoked. This effectively exiled Chaplin from the country he had helped build into a cinematic powerhouse. Chaplin's exile from the United States was a devastating blow to both his personal life and his career. He spent the next several years living in Europe, primarily in Switzerland, far from the industry that had once embraced him. While in Europe, Chaplin continued to make films, but his works lacked the same widespread cultural impact as his earlier films. He made Limelight, 1952, a semi-autobiographical film that reflected his own feelings of being an outsider in the entertainment world. Though it was a critical success, the film did not resonate with audiences in the same way his previous works had. Chaplin's exile marked a significant shift in his career, one that saw him isolated from the Hollywood community that had once been his home. Despite the challenges he faced in exile, Chaplin's reputation as a cinematic genius remained intact. In 1972, after a two-decade absence from the United States, Chaplin was invited to receive an honorary Oscar at the Academy Awards. This moment, which saw Chaplin receive a standing ovation from the audience, marked the beginning of a partial reconciliation with Hollywood. It also served as a recognition of Chaplin's immense contribution to the world of cinema, even as his personal and political life remained a subject of debate. The award was a symbol of the respect Chaplin still commanded in the world of film, despite the controversies that had plagued his later years. By the time of his death in 1977, Chaplin had become both a symbol of the golden age of cinema and a figure who embodied the complexities of fame, politics, and personal struggle. His influence on the film industry remained undeniable, with filmmakers across the world drawing inspiration from his innovative approach to comedy, storytelling, and character development. However, his life also highlighted the tensions between artistic freedom, personal beliefs, and the public's expectations of its idols. While Chaplin's comedic genius would never be forgotten, his political views and personal scandals remained a source of division, ensuring that his legacy would be remembered not only for his artistic accomplishments, but also for his challenges and controversies. In the final decades of Charlie Chaplin's life, his journey from Hollywood's brightest star to an isolated figure living abroad provided both a bittersweet reflection on his past accomplishments and an opportunity to evaluate his place in history. Though Chaplin's exile from the United States had stripped him of much of his former celebrity status, it also allowed him the time and space to reflect on his career and legacy. During these years, Chaplin became increasingly introspective, considering the impact of his work on the world and the cultural shifts that had both shaped and challenged him. After his departure from the United States in 1952, Chaplin settled in Switzerland, where he lived in the quiet and peaceful surroundings of the small town of Courser-sur-Vevey. Here, in the calm of the Swiss countryside, Chaplin began to spend more time with his family, focusing on his personal life rather than his professional career. The later years of his life were marked by a sense of nostalgia, as Chaplin often reflected on the heights of his fame and the political battles that had so severely affected him. He had been driven out of America, but he had also left behind a profound legacy, a legacy that he now considered from the distance of his European exile. Though he was removed from the public eye, Chaplin continued to work creatively, producing his final films in the 1950s and 1960s. His 1957 film, A King in New York, is an example of his ongoing ability to blend satire with personal reflections. In this film, Chaplin portrayed a deposed monarch who flees to the United States, only to find himself embroiled in the complex political climate of the Cold War. The film, with its sharp commentary on the United States political atmosphere, served as a direct critique of the very forces that had forced Chaplin into exile. It was a film born out of his own experiences as an outsider and his ongoing frustration with American politics, particularly with the McCarthy hearings and the way they had unjustly targeted him. However, Chaplin's later works were met with mixed reactions, largely due to his time away from the Hollywood limelight. Audiences by then had shifted their tastes in cinema, and Chaplin's style of physical comedy, once considered revolutionary, was beginning to seem antiquated. While his earlier films were celebrated for their innovation, the industry had moved on to new forms of expression, and Chaplin's contributions to cinema were now seen through the lens of nostalgia. Despite these challenges, Chaplin's reputation as a cinematic genius endured, as did his desire to continue creating films, even if they did not receive the widespread acclaim that his earlier works had garnered. In 1966, Chaplin released The Countess from Hong Kong, a romantic comedy starring Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren. The film was a departure from his usual style, incorporating more dialogue and a more conventional narrative structure. However, The Countess from Hong Kong was not the commercial success Chaplin had hoped for, and it marked the last film he would ever direct. The film's failure, along with the increasingly critical reception of his later works, signaled to Chaplin that his days as a filmmaker were drawing to a close. Though he had created some of the most influential and beloved films in cinema history, the industry had changed in ways that left Chaplin's earlier genius behind. It was clear that the world of cinema, much like the world itself, was moving forward, and Chaplin was now an artist caught between two eras. By this point, Chaplin had also begun to deal with the personal toll of his long and tumultuous life. He had suffered significant losses, including the deaths of his siblings and friends, and the passage of time had left him feeling more reflective and melancholic. He had seen the world change in ways he had never expected, from the rise of World War II to the shifting dynamics of Hollywood, and now, as an older man, he found himself in a new world, one where he was no longer the star, but the elder statesman, watching from the sidelines as younger filmmakers forged ahead. In the early 1970s, Chaplin began to receive renewed recognition for his contributions to cinema. This period saw the gradual return of respect for his work, with tributes and retrospectives celebrating his career. In 1972, Chaplin was invited back to the United States to receive an honorary Academy Award in recognition of his groundbreaking achievements in film. This moment, which took place at the Academy Awards ceremony, was a poignant and emotional one. Chaplin, who had been absent from Hollywood for over 2 decades, received a standing ovation from the audience, a sign of the respect and admiration he still commanded from the film industry. The moment marked an emotional reconciliation with Hollywood and American audiences, a long-awaited recognition of Chaplin's immense impact on the world of film. At the ceremony, Chaplin was visibly moved, and the crowd's warm reception was a testament to the lasting legacy he had left behind. This moment also allowed Chaplin to reflect on his career in a way he hadn't been able to do in years. As he accepted the award, he no longer seemed the embattled artist he once was, but rather a beloved icon, celebrated for his work rather than his controversies. Chaplin's later years were also defined by his family life. By this point, Chaplin had remarried, and he was a father to several children. He took solace in the company of his loved ones and found comfort in their support. His children often accompanied him on his travels, and Chaplin enjoyed a relatively peaceful family life, far from the pressures of the film industry that had once consumed him. In his Swiss home, Chaplin found a degree of tranquility, which allowed him to reflect on his legacy as a filmmaker and as a cultural figure. As Chaplin entered his final years, he continued to reflect on the changes that had occurred throughout his lifetime. He had lived through the silent film era, the rise of sound, the golden age of Hollywood, the political upheavals of the 1930s and 1940s, and the shifts in cinema that came with the 1960s. Through it all, he had remained a figure who defined the art of film comedy. But as the years wore on, he found himself increasingly distanced from the modern world. In December 1977, Chaplin passed away at the age of 88. His death marked the end of an era of silent films, of groundbreaking physical comedy, and a profound cultural influence. The world mourned the loss of a cinematic giant, but Chaplin's legacy lived on through his films. His ability to capture the essence of humanity, to blend laughter with tears, and to create characters who were at once universally relatable and deeply unique, ensured that his work would endure for generations. Even in his final years, Chaplin had continued to demonstrate that cinema was a medium capable of transcending time and place, a universal language that could speak to the hearts of people from all corners of the world. Charlie Chaplin's influence on the world of cinema extends far beyond his individual films. His artistry and innovations reshaped not only the landscape of film comedy, but also the way films were made, perceived, and consumed by audiences. Chaplin's genius was not confined to his ability to make people laugh. It lay in his extraordinary capacity to combine humor with poignant social commentary, and his ability to tap into universal human emotions. His contributions transcended the realm of silent film, leaving an indelible mark on both the history of cinema and popular culture. The tramp character, which Chaplin created in 1914, became a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and human dignity. Through the tramp, Chaplin conveyed complex, emotional narratives without the need for spoken words. The tramp's simplicity and vulnerability made him a universally relatable figure, representing the marginalized and downtrodden, the working-class man struggling against the injustices of society. Audiences from all over the world connected with the tramp because his struggles were their own, be it his attempts to survive in a cruel world, his pursuit of love, or his moments of triumph against seemingly insurmountable odds. Through these universal themes, Chaplin was able to speak to audiences from diverse backgrounds and cultures, making the tramp a truly global icon. Chaplin's mastery of physical comedy was unparalleled. His precision, timing, and ability to evoke laughter through exaggerated, often absurd, movements were key elements that set him apart from his peers. His inventive gags, such as the famous feeding the machine sequence in Modern Times or the iconic dance of the rolls in the Gold Rush, are prime examples of his exceptional skill in manipulating the body to create humor. These gags were not just physical tricks. They were carefully constructed moments that revealed something deeper about the human condition. In Chaplin's world, comedy was not simply about making people laugh. It was about using humor to illuminate the absurdity of life's most difficult situations. Yet, Chaplin's films were more than just slapstick humor. His ability to imbue even the most ridiculous situations with emotional depth and insight was what made his work so remarkable. In films like City Lights and The Kid, Chaplin blended humor with pathos, creating moments of deep emotional resonance. The tramp's relationships with others, particularly his tender affection for the blind girl in City Lights, demonstrated Chaplin's understanding of the complexities of love, sacrifice, and human connection. These films were not simply comedies. They were meditations on the fragility and beauty of life, addressing issues of poverty, loneliness, and the desire for human contact. Chaplin's ability to balance humor with heart made his films accessible to audiences on multiple levels, ensuring that his work could be appreciated by both children and adults, casual viewers, and discerning critics. In addition to his technical and emotional innovations, Chaplin's impact on the filmmaking process itself was profound. He was a true auteur, writing, directing, producing, composing, and starring in most of his films. His control over every aspect of his productions allowed him to create films that were deeply personal and reflective of his vision. Chaplin's meticulous attention to detail, his willingness to experiment with new techniques, and his ability to push the boundaries of cinematic language contributed to the evolution of the medium. His use of the long take, for instance, was revolutionary. Rather than cutting away to other angles or scenes, Chaplin often chose to let scenes unfold in real time, allowing the audience to experience the action without interruption. This not only heightened the dramatic impact of his gags, but also made the emotional beats of his films more powerful. Chaplin's work was also marked by an acute awareness of the social and political climate of his time. Many of his films contained subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, critiques of social inequality, industrialization, and the treatment of the working class. In modern times, Chaplin critiqued the dehumanizing effects of industrialization and the rise of the machine, portraying the tramp as a cog in the massive, impersonal factory system. Through the tramp's struggle to keep up with the fast-paced demands of the modern world, Chaplin exposed the inherent absurdity of a system that prioritized efficiency over humanity. The Great Dictator, on the other hand, used satire to openly challenge the rise of fascism and Adolf Hitler, reflecting Chaplin's unwavering commitment to stand against tyranny and injustice. These works were not only reflections of Chaplin's artistic brilliance, but also his deep engagement with the world around him. He used cinema as a means to address issues of global significance, elevating film from mere entertainment to a powerful vehicle for social change. Chaplin's influence also extended to the field of acting. His iconic tramp character is often regarded as one of the greatest performances in the history of cinema, due to Chaplin's mastery of physical expression and his ability to communicate emotions without dialogue. His performance was a masterclass in nonverbal acting, demonstrating how much could be conveyed through the smallest movements: a raised eyebrow, a hesitant step, a look of confusion. Chaplin's ability to convey such a wide range of emotions through his body alone revolutionized the way actors approach their craft, and his influence can be seen in the performances of many of today's great actors. Perhaps one of Chaplin's most enduring contributions to cinema was his ability to create timeless, universal characters. While many films from Chaplin's era have aged poorly, his best works remain as relevant today as they were in the early 20th century. The Tramp, for example, is a character whose struggles are as familiar to modern audiences as they were to those of Chaplin's time. His experiences, his yearning for love, his battles with authority, his desire for dignity in an often hostile world, speak to fundamental human concerns that have remained unchanged for generations. This universal appeal is what has allowed Chaplin's work to endure across time and cultures, ensuring that his films continue to be appreciated by new generations of viewers. Chaplin's impact also extended beyond the realm of film. His influence on the broader cultural landscape can be seen in his role as a symbol of the struggle against oppression and the pursuit of justice. Throughout his life, Chaplin was vocal about his support for various humanitarian causes, including his opposition to war and his advocacy for the rights of the downtrodden. His films, while comedic, often carried a strong moral message, urging viewers to stand up for the vulnerable and fight for a better, more just world. This connection between Chaplin's art and his activism contributed to his lasting appeal, as his films were not just entertainment. They were calls for social change. The global impact of Chaplin's work is perhaps best evidenced by the way his films have been embraced by audiences worldwide. Despite the passage of time and the evolution of cinema, Chaplin's films remain as popular as ever. In countries across the globe, the Tramp continues to serve as a symbol of the underdog, a reminder of the resilience and resourcefulness of ordinary people in the face of hardship. Chaplin's films have been translated into countless languages, and his influence can be seen in the works of directors from all corners of the world. His impact on global cinema is so profound that it is nearly impossible to imagine what the medium would have been like without him. As cinema evolved throughout the 20th century, Chaplin's legacy loomed large. The rise of sound and color film, the experimentation of directors like Fellini, Goddard, and Kurosawa, and the explosion of blockbuster filmmaking in Hollywood all occurred against the backdrop of Chaplin's pioneering work. His influence can be seen in the way filmmakers approach comedy, in their use of physicality and gesture, and in their ability to balance humor with emotional depth. Chaplin's work paved the way for generations of filmmakers to explore the power of cinema as a universal language, a language capable of transcending borders, cultures, and time itself. Charlie Chaplin's life was not without its controversies, particularly when it came to his political views. Throughout his career, he was an outspoken critic of various social and political systems, and these stances often placed him at odds with powerful figures. His public and personal beliefs, rooted in progressive ideals of social justice, pacifism, and equality, made him both a beloved icon to many and a target for political and ideological forces that sought to discredit him. Chaplin's life would ultimately be defined, in part, by his ability to navigate the choppy waters of political backlash and media scrutiny, which, at one point, led to his exile from the United States. In the 1930s and 1940s, Chaplin's political views became more pronounced. As a self-proclaimed pacifist and critic of industrial capitalism, he became increasingly vocal in his condemnation of both fascism and communism. His films often reflected his concerns about the oppression of the working class, the dangers of unchecked capitalism, and the rise of authoritarian regimes. Modern Times and The Great Dictator, for example, openly criticized the dehumanizing effects of industrialization and the totalitarian threat of fascism. Yet his anti-authoritarian stance made him both a hero and a target for various political factions. During World War II, Chaplin's opposition to fascism was clear in his satirical portrayal of Adolf Hitler in The Great Dictator, 1940, a bold move that was controversial even for Hollywood. The film's release came at a time when the United States had not yet entered the war, and the notion of directly challenging the Nazi regime was considered dangerous. Chaplin's portrayal of Hitler as the despotic dictator Adenoid Hynkel was not only a comedic take on the brutal dictator's mannerisms, but also a direct political statement against the fascist forces threatening Europe. Despite the film's comic elements, its underlying message was serious, urging people to resist tyranny and to value human dignity over the pursuit of power. Chaplin's stance on war, however, would not endear him to all of his fellow Americans, particularly those with more conservative political leanings. His commitment to pacifism and his outspoken criticism of the U.S. government's policies, especially during the McCarthy era, made him a frequent target of political attacks. In the post-war climate, with the Cold War intensifying and the fear of communism spreading, Chaplin found himself at the center of a storm of accusations. His leftist sympathies, real or perceived, were increasingly scrutinized by the U.S. government, and his name was added to the growing list of individuals suspected of communist ties. The most notorious chapter in Chaplin's political controversies occurred in 1952, when he became a victim of the anti-communist hysteria that gripped the United States during the McCarthy era. In that year, Chaplin was preparing for a promotional tour of Limelight, a film that he had directed and starred in. However, when he attempted to re-enter the United States from a trip to England, he was informed that his re-entry visa had been denied. The official reason given was that Chaplin had been accused of un-American activities and had refused to cooperate with authorities during their investigation into his political affiliations. The move was a direct result of his outspoken political beliefs and his perceived alignment with left-wing causes. This decision effectively exiled Chaplin from the United States, the very country where he had built his career and become a beloved icon. Chaplin was devastated by the news, but he would never return to live in the United States. The government's decision to revoke his visa and bar him from returning reflected the growing climate of fear and suspicion in America during the Cold War, a time when even the slightest association with leftist politics could destroy a person's career. Chaplin was accused of being a communist sympathizer, despite the fact that he had never been a member of the Communist Party and had never openly advocated for the overthrow of the U.S. government. Chaplin's treatment at the hands of the U.S. government was deeply unfair, and it underscored the intolerance of the era. The decision to bar him from the country was a direct blow to his career, but it also had a lasting impact on his personal life. He felt betrayed by the very country that had once embraced him as its own. In a statement, Chaplin expressed his disillusionment, lamenting that he was being punished for his political beliefs, which he saw as a fundamental part of his identity as an artist. For Chaplin, the banishment was not just a personal injustice. It was a symbol of the broader suppression of dissent in a country that prided itself on freedom of speech. Though Chaplin was forced to live abroad, the effects of his exile did not erase his impact on the world of cinema. His works continued to inspire filmmakers and audiences around the globe, and his career as a filmmaker remained highly respected, particularly in Europe. However, the U.S. government's actions effectively ended his career in Hollywood, and the banishment from the country he had helped make the epicenter of global film marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The political controversies that surrounded Chaplin also reflected the larger ideological battles of the time. The Cold War was a period of intense polarization, with the United States and the Soviet Union locked in a battle for global dominance. In such a climate, Chaplin's progressive views made him an easy target for those who sought to eliminate any form of opposition to the government's political agenda. His exile, then, became symbolic of the broader repression of dissenting voices in the United States during the McCarthy era. It was not just Chaplin who was caught in this ideological web. Many others, from writers to filmmakers to activists, faced similar persecution for their political beliefs. Despite the trauma of his exile, Chaplin remained resilient. He continued to work on his films, focusing his energy on the creation of A King in New York and The Countess from Hong Kong, films that offered critiques of both American politics and the state of global affairs. These films reflected his ongoing concerns about the injustices and absurdities of the political systems that shaped the world, even if they did not receive the same critical reception as his earlier work. As the years passed, Charlie Chaplin's life entered a quieter, more introspective phase. Having been exiled from the United States and living in Switzerland, he found solace in the company of his family, away from the intense public scrutiny that had marked his earlier years. Despite the personal toll his exile had taken on him, Chaplin's artistic spirit remained unbroken, and his later years became a period of reflection and reconciliation with both his past and his public image. This phase in his life saw a shift from his role as an entertainer and activist to a more contemplative figure, one who sought to understand his place in history and the lasting impact of his work. Chaplin's exile had forced him to reevaluate his position in the world of cinema and politics. As he aged, he became increasingly aware of the profound influence his work had on the development of modern film. During his time in Switzerland, he continued to work on personal projects, but he did so with less of the obsessive drive that had characterized his earlier career. While many expected Chaplin to disappear from the public eye, he maintained a level of visibility, giving interviews and speaking about his experiences. These moments of reflection often revealed a man who had come to terms with his own legacy, recognizing both the accolades and controversies that had defined his life. In the late 1950s, Chaplin made a significant return to the public sphere with the release of A King in New York, 1957, and The Countess from Hong Kong, 1967. These films marked a notable shift in his creative focus, as Chaplin was no longer the young man who had revolutionized silent cinema. He had grown older and more thoughtful, yet his films retained the characteristic sharp social commentary that had made him famous. A King in New York, for instance, was a satirical exploration of American politics and the media, reflecting Chaplin's disillusionment with the country that had once embraced him. The film, though not as successful as his earlier works, was a pointed commentary on consumerism and the political climate of the Cold War. In the midst of his work in film, Chaplin's personal life also saw significant changes. He had remarried in 1943 to Una O'Neill, the daughter of famed playwright Eugene O'Neill. Despite their 36-year age difference, the marriage proved to be a deeply supportive and lasting partnership. Una was instrumental in helping Chaplin cope with the emotional toll of his exile, and together, they had 8 children. Chaplin's family life became a source of comfort and joy in his later years, and his relationship with Una was characterized by mutual respect and affection. In many ways, Una's presence provided Chaplin with the stability he had longed for during his tumultuous earlier years. While his personal life was marked by family and relative tranquility, Chaplin's public life remained fraught with the tension of his political past. Although he was no longer the target of McCarthy-era witch hunts, the scars of his exile lingered. In 1972, after years of living abroad, Chaplin returned to the United States for the first time in 2 decades to accept an honorary Academy Award. This momentous occasion was both a celebration of his career and a personal victory. The decision to honor him with an Academy Award was a long overdue acknowledgement of his immense contribution to cinema. It was also a recognition of his resilience in the face of the political persecution that had nearly destroyed him. Chaplin's return to the United States was a deeply emotional moment for the man who had been the face of Hollywood for so many years. The recognition was bittersweet, coming after years of being shunned by the very industry he had helped to build. He received a standing ovation at the Academy Award ceremony, and his speech was one of quiet dignity. Chaplin spoke of the difficulties he had faced, both personally and professionally, but he also expressed his gratitude for the recognition and the opportunity to return to a place that had once been home. For many, it was a fitting closure to the chapter of Chaplin's life that had been marked by exile and controversy. However, his legacy was still a subject of debate. While many in the entertainment industry and the general public celebrated Chaplin's return, there were those who could not forget the political controversies of his past. His earlier criticisms of the American government and his outspoken left-wing views had left a lasting mark on his reputation. Though the recognition of his work was now widespread, some were still hesitant to embrace him fully, remembering the years of uncertainty and the accusations that had been levied against him. Yet, for Chaplin, the honors and accolades he received in his later years were less about seeking redemption and more about coming to terms with the full scope of his life's work. In his final years, Chaplin found peace in the quiet of his Swiss home. He spent his days writing, reflecting, and working on projects that were deeply personal. Although his health began to decline, he remained mentally sharp, frequently discussing his past, his career, and the changing world of cinema with those closest to him. His thoughts on the state of film were often nostalgic, recalling the golden days of silent cinema with a sense of fondness. Yet he also acknowledged the ways in which the medium had evolved, and he expressed admiration for the directors and actors who had followed in his footsteps. Chaplin's final years were also marked by a growing recognition of his humanitarian contributions. While his political views had made him a polarizing figure during his lifetime, in his later years, he was increasingly seen as a symbol of the fight for freedom and justice. His support for the rights of the working class, his critiques of totalitarianism, and his staunch pacifism earned him a place as a beloved figure among those who championed social justice. His films, which had once been seen as simple entertainments, were now viewed as powerful statements on the human condition, transcending the boundaries of their time. Chaplin passed away on December 25, 1977, at the age of 88. His death marked the end of an era in cinema. The world mourned the loss of a man who had brought joy to millions through his films and whose influence on the art of cinema remained unparalleled. In the years following his death, Chaplin's films were rediscovered by new generations of filmgoers, and his legacy as one of the greatest filmmakers in history solidified. His unique ability to mix comedy and drama, his unparalleled talent for physical humor, and his commitment to using film as a tool for social commentary ensured that his work would never be forgotten. Charlie Chaplin's influence did not end with his passing. Rather, his legacy only deepened with time, spreading across continents and generations, reshaping not only the art of cinema, but also the cultural consciousness of the 20th century and beyond. His persona, most iconically captured in the figure of the tramp, became a universal symbol of resilience, dignity, and humor in the face of adversity. Chaplin left behind more than a collection of films. He bequeathed to the world a blueprint of how art can mirror society, question authority, and connect profoundly with the human soul. The cinematic techniques that Chaplin pioneered continue to inform the language of film today. His use of pantomime, meticulous attention to composition, and mastery of comedic timing are studied by filmmakers and actors alike. Modern directors, from Martin Scorsese to Alejandro González Iñárritu, have acknowledged the ways in which Chaplin's work shaped their approach to storytelling. His ability to express complex emotions without dialogue, relying instead on body language, lighting, and visual metaphor, revolutionized the silent film era and established foundational principles that remain relevant in contemporary cinema. Chaplin's influence extends far beyond Hollywood. In countries like India, Japan, France, and Brazil, his films have been celebrated for their emotional universality and social critique. In India, for example, Chaplin became a beloved figure, with his work inspiring generations of filmmakers who identified with his portrayals of poverty, injustice, and perseverance. Japanese artists and animators often cited Chaplin's blend of humor and pathos as a key influence on the development of emotionally layered animation and storytelling. In France, he was admired not only for his artistry, but also for his philosophical undertones and humanist messages. The enduring appeal of the tramp lies in the character's elasticity. He is both specific and universal. Though clearly a product of the early 20th century, the tramp embodies timeless human struggles, displacement, survival, and the pursuit of happiness. Dressed in his ill-fitting suit, bowler hat, and oversized shoes, he remains a global archetype of the downtrodden everyman who retains his dignity through humor and compassion. Artists, writers, and political activists have repeatedly invoked the tramp as a symbol of resistance against oppression and dehumanization, especially in times of economic or political turmoil. Chaplin's innovations in storytelling also laid the groundwork for blending genres in cinema. He was among the first to combine slapstick comedy with heartfelt drama, forging a hybrid form that allowed audiences to laugh and cry within the same scene. This approach humanized the medium of film and elevated it from mere entertainment to an expressive art form. Films such as City Lights and Modern Times demonstrated that humor could be both entertaining and intellectually provocative, subtly addressing topics such as automation, social inequality, and mental health without sacrificing emotional authenticity. In academic circles, Chaplin's work has become the subject of extensive study, not just in film schools, but also in disciplines such as political science, philosophy, and sociology. Scholars analyze his films for their subversive undertones, their critique of capitalist structures, and their psychological insights into the human condition. His role as a public intellectual, though sometimes overshadowed by his on-screen persona, has also been increasingly acknowledged. He was not only a performer, but a thinker who used his medium to raise fundamental questions about society, ethics, and identity. Museums and cultural institutions around the world have dedicated exhibitions to Chaplin's life and art. The Chaplin's World Museum in Courseulles, Switzerland, situated in his final residence, offers an immersive experience into his creative process and personal life. Through carefully preserved artifacts, interactive installations, and restored film clips, visitors are reminded of his multifaceted genius. These curated spaces serve as both historical archives and living tributes to a man whose impact continues to reverberate through popular culture. Beyond the realm of cinema, Chaplin's influence can be seen in music, theater, literature, and even fashion. His iconic silhouette has been reinterpreted in paintings, stage plays, and even political cartoons. His own musical compositions, including the hauntingly beautiful theme "Smile," have transcended the screen to become standalone works of art. Generations of performers, from Marcel Marceau to Rowan Atkinson, have drawn inspiration from Chaplin's physical comedy and emotional range. The echoes of his influence are evident in contemporary storytelling forms, such as silent sketch comedy, mime, and visual satire. Chaplin's legacy also encompasses the ethical dimension of being an artist. His life, marked by both immense acclaim and controversial exile, serves as a case study in the moral responsibilities of creators. He demonstrated that artists could challenge societal norms, speak truth to power, and still connect with wide audiences. Chaplin did not shy away from risk. He used his platform to advocate for compassion and justice, even when it cost him his standing in political circles. His courage in staying true to his beliefs remains a source of inspiration for creators who view art as a vehicle for change. Today, Charlie Chaplin remains not just a name in film history, but a living symbol of cinema's highest potential: to illuminate, to humanize, and to endure. As technology continues to transform how stories are told and consumed, Chaplin's work reminds us of the irreplaceable value of human expression. His films, crafted with care, sincerity, and vision, endure not merely as relics of a bygone era, but as timeless testaments to the power of storytelling. In every corner of the world where a silent laugh or a gentle tear accompanies one of his scenes, Chaplin lives on, eternal, relevant, and deeply human.